Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we're talking about one of the most important but misunderstood concepts in debate. And we're going to be talking about stakeholder analysis. So if you want to build arguments that judges actually buy, then this is a tool that you need to master. So a lot of debaters lose rounds not because their logic is wrong, but because their arguments are failing the simple question, which is the so what part. Um, and so you can talk about economics, geopolitics, or rights all you want, but if you don't really show clearly who is affected and why it matters, then your arguments just float in the air, right? Judges don't vote for the abstract logic, they vote for the impacts on the people or the stakeholders, and that's where stakeholder analysis comes in. So, what is stakeholder analysis? It is a way of structuring your arguments around the people or groups who are directly affected by the motion. So, instead of just saying, this policy is good or this policy is harmful, stakeholder analysis forces you to say good or harmful, but for who, right? So, it brings, not only does it bring clarity, it also brings direction and also brings a lot of weight to your arguments. And that's going to be pretty important. When you analyze stakeholders, think in categories. Typical stakeholders in most debates include the government, it includes the minorities, the low-income groups, future generations, workers, corporations, national security actors, the international community, and sometimes the moral agents like society as a whole. But just make sure to not overcomplicate it. Just make sure to identify who experiences the largest change in outcome because of the motion. Like who is the most affected is just generally what you want to look for. Um, Now let me give you like a framework. Every stakeholder argument follows three simple steps. Three. So you're gonna think about identify, impact, and weigh. These three things are really important. One is identify the stakeholder. So name the group. Then explain the impact. How are they affected and why are they affected? Three, explain the weigh the impact. Why does this matter more than the other side's impacts? So those are the three crucial steps that you want to take, and these are going to be really important. If you follow that structure, you're going to build clear, persuasive arguments in a consistent manner. So let's see what that looks like in action. Let's say that the motion is this House believes that developing countries should prioritize economic growth over environmental protection. A weak argument is that many average debaters give is something like economic growth is important because it helps the country develop. So that sounds fine, but there is really no human impact. It fails the so what test that I talked to you guys about, right? So a better argument using stakeholders sounds like this. The key stakeholder here is low-income workers in developing countries. These people rely on manufacturing and industrial jobs to survive. So if governments enforce strict environmental regulations too early, then investments from foreign actors or foreign investors are just going to leave. So that means that factories are going to close down. And so that also means that millions of people are going to lose their jobs, so that's going to push families back into extreme poverty. Poverty, you're not just going to end there, right? Because poverty, you have to make it clear that poverty isn't just a singular statistic. Rather, it means, for example, things like malnutrition, children dropping out of school, and also preventable diseases killing people and taking the lives of innocent people away. So in this debate, we should prioritize immediate survival for vulnerable workers before the long-term environmental goals. So that's where you get things clear, right? That's where you kind of, have the clear stakeholder analysis, and then you focus on the stakeholders and who's actually impacted. So you're talking about the human impact. So notice what changed. It's not just about economic growth anymore, right? What is it about? It's about the real people and it's also about the real impacts. And by adding that last sentence, we also gave the judge a weighing mechanism, something to decide the round on, right? Because judges need a clear mechanism to weigh the debate on and to kind of decide what side is actually benefiting the people on the ground. Because debates happen for people, right? Debates happen because, there are certain issues in society that are affecting me, affecting the community, affecting people that we care about. Yeah. So stakeholders also make your rebuttal like way stronger. So if the other side says environmental damage is irreversible, so we should protect the planet first, then what you say is you don't have to argue earth science. Like you just bring it back to stakeholders, and that's how you are gonna argue it, right? So even if there is long-term environmental harm, the people who suffer the most right now, right, are those in the extreme poverty. If they lose jobs and income today, they won't even live long enough to see that so-called irreversible damage. You see what I'm doing here, right? You're bringing in stakeholders to prove why you should care more about how these stakeholders are affected than whatever they're trying to make up about the environment. So immediate human survival comes before the long-term conservation of the environment. And that's how you turn the stakeholder analysis into like a clash. Because you guys all know what clashes are. You guys know that that's usually what whip speakers do. They usually come up in a debate round and they bring up the most important, points in the debate to clash on and to prove why one is more important than the other. So right, you're not really, just not responding. You're just recentering the debate on your winning ground. And that's going to be so strategically important, which is why I'm, having a separate video on the stakeholder analysis, building up from what we learned in the argument archetypes lecture. So why does this work so well with the judges? There are three reasons, right? There's a lot of threes in this video, right? First of all, it's really clear. So they immediately understand why your argument matters because there's a human level impact to it. Secondly, it sounds pretty responsible, right? You're really debating the real world consequences. You're not just debating based on theory, what's going to happen. You're not just debating on like, examples, right? So you're actually debating these real world consequences. And thirdly, it gives them a voting reason. So when you push, and so when you weigh by stakeholders, you're basically telling them how to evaluate the debate. Judge, you should evaluate the debate and you should make this clear in your speeches, right? You should be like, Judge, I think the winner of this debate is gonna be which side better protects this type of demographic and this type of stakeholder. And so you're giving them a guidance, right? And so this is gonna make it very easier, much easier for the judge to, um, yeah, make these decisions. Yes. So, and here's the best part, right? This is the most important. You can use stakeholder analysis in every single speech. And so what does this mean? It means that stakeholder analysis are so important and very versatile to the point where you're able to kind of apply them to a lot of other debates and literally every single speech that you're trying to give. Constructive, right? Rebuttal, and even like your summary, like reply speeches maybe. So here's a simple template like you can literally memorize and use in your next round. So you're gonna say the key stakeholder here is blank. They're affected because blank. This impact matters because blank. So that means that in this debate we should prioritize blank. And so that's it. So if you just fill in that skeleton, that structure with the logic, you will immediately sound, not only organized, but you're also going to be like, persuasive to the judge. You're also going to be very strategically, in an advantage, right? And so let's just wrap up with this. Good debaters are going to explain their arguments, and great debaters are going to explain people. So they win. So great debaters win because they connect logic to human impact. So that's where the stakeholder analysis is really important. And quite, that is what the stakeholder analysis itself is fundamentally about. And it's just basically, you should think about it with arguments, but they're arguments with purpose, and they're pretty important. So if you found this helpful, just feel free to share it with your debate team or your partner. I think I'm just trying to share the information that I learned from a lot of good debaters that I debated with, that I went against, that I lost to. Because I've been watching so many different high quality lectures for over 5 years, and so I will be posting more of these breakdowns. So if you just want content about like impact weighing, like for example, like narrative persuasion extensions, or how to build like round winning frames, then I'll also be able to touch upon those contents as well, and those lectures. And I'll also try to make some, online digital materials um, to post somewhere public in order to help as many people as possible so they can just, treat it as like a handbook and access it every single time they need it. Yep. Thank you.